This is King World News. I'm Eric King. We are a nonpartisan network, as everyone knows, and have people on from both sides of the aisle. And you're about to hear an extraordinary interview with the often controversial but never boring Congressman Alan Grayson, where you will hear clips of the exchange he had with Mr. Alvarez, General Counsel of the Federal Reserve. Congressman Grayson is a major supporter of Ron Paul's Audit the Fed bill, H.R. 1207. Remember to go to our homepage at www.kingworldnews.com for more interviews, where this week we also have legendary investor Jim Rogers, one of the top technical analysts on Wall Street, Luis Yamada, founder of Technical Research Advisors. Also on the Gold Plus page, we will have part 2 of a 4-part systemic failure series with Jim Willie of the Hat Trick Letter. Joining us now for this special Meeting in the Aisle segment is Congressman Alan Grayson, who is another champion of Ron Paul's bill, H.R. 1207, to audit the Fed. I'm going to jump right into this, Congressman Grayson, their exchange that you had with the General Counsel, Mr. Alvarez of the Federal Reserve, and play a clip from that to start off.
Federal Reserve ever tried to manipulate the U.S. stock market?
No, sir. Not that I'm aware of.
Not that you're aware of, but you're the attorney, right?
That's right.
So you might not even know, right?
I would expect to know if there were something like that being done. I'm not aware of that at all.
And if you did know, you'd be bound by attorney-client privilege, and you wouldn't be able to tell us, right?
Sir, if there were something the Federal Reserve were doing outside its legal authority, I would have an obligation to say something about that.
All right, so we agree that any participation by the Federal Reserve in the stock market or the futures market is outside the Federal Reserve's legal authority, right?
The Federal Reserve has some authority to regulate various aspects of markets and participate in markets in certain ways. So I think your question is too categorical, but...
I think not, actually. Why don't you answer it?
I don't know. Your question is so overbroad, I don't know where to begin to answer that.
I don't think it's that overbroad. I'd like you to tell me whether it's within the Federal Reserve's legal authority to try to manipulate the stock market or the futures market.
So I don't believe the Federal Reserve tries to manipulate the stock market.
Tries? Come on.
No, so...
Do they?
The Federal Reserve's obligation and what it does in monetary policy is try to influence interest rates, and in that way to maximize employment and to stabilize prices.
Now, if in fact the Federal Reserve were trying to do that or doing it, isn't that something that we'd want to know?
And the extent that the Federal Reserve influences interest rates, it does make announcements of that decision immediately.
That's not what I said. I said manipulate the stock market or the futures market. Wouldn't we want to know? Yes or no?
Could you define what you mean by...
I think you know what I mean, Mr. Alvarez. Now, wouldn't it be very helpful to have a GAO audit on that subject? Wouldn't it?
I don't know what it is that you're seeking to audit, sir.
Oh, my goodness.
You know, Congressman Grayson, it's funny because when you first started to question the Federal Reserve's General Counsel, Mr. Alvarez, he seemed very condescending and dismissive. And I've always said people don't see Congressman Grayson coming. And what's funny is less than a minute into that, he's in trouble. You can see he's in trouble. And he starts to dance around and proceed really to not answer your question. I don't know if he even answered if he would try to stop that from happening. But can you give me your comments or your take from that exchange?
Sure. My goal right from the beginning, which we accomplished, was to show how ridiculous it is that a fundamental question like this can't be answered unless we take his word for it. Oh, sure, let's just take his word for it, this mouthpiece for the Federal Reserve, this fellow who's literally hired to say whatever sounds good. He's their attorney, for goodness sake. And we have to take his word for it. So what I was trying to do and what I succeeded in doing is showing the need for an independent audit of the Federal Reserve.
I think Mr. Alvarez, it's safe to say, knows a lot more than he actually answered in your line of questioning. And I'm sticking with that because we'll play some more clips in a minute. But I want to go back to this manipulation of the stock market. As you began to pen him down, Congressman Grayson, did you sense an unease in him in the sense that, as he disclosed, he knows what's going on over there? and that maybe not everything is above board. And so he seemed to be really dancing around the question of, was in fact the Federal Reserve engaging in, through these various banking institutions, a manipulation of the U.S. stock market?
Well, yes, and in fact, you just can't get a straight answer out of them on anything, even a question as important as this one. And if they do try to give you an answer that sounds like a straight answer, you simply don't believe it because there's no way to verify it. I mean, for goodness sake, it was Ronald Reagan who said, trust but verify, and we're supposed to take their word for it on something as earth-shaking as whether the whole U.S. stock market is a rigged game controlled by the Federal Reserve Bank. There's been speculation now for years and years and years, that the Federal Reserve has intervened in the stock market through the futures market from time to time in order to avoid a crash. And if that's the case, think of the front-running opportunities. Think of what that does to confidence in the values in the marketplace. If the whole thing is being propped up by the endless supply of credit called the Federal Reserve Bank, then people need to know that.
I want to play 2 more clips from the exchange. Let me play another one real briefly here.
Let's go on to something else. Does the Federal Reserve actually possess all the gold that's listed on their balance sheet? Do they actually possess it?
Yes.
Has that been audited by the GAO?
I believe that's within the GAO's authority to audit. It certainly is something that our independent accountant is able to verify and does.
So if I go ahead and ask for a GAO audit, you won't oppose it, right?
To auditing the presence of the gold on the facility, I don't see any reason to object to that.
Hallelujah.
Absolutely.
Isn't that nice? We're going to have a lot of interesting results out of that. We've got other members who come in with their 5 minutes, and they basically give a speech, and then after 4 minutes and 59 seconds, they say, "Do you agree with that?" What I wanted to do is I thought hard about what we could actually accomplish with 5 minutes with the General Counsel, and I got him to commit that we can do an independent audit of the Federal Reserve's gold. And this is something that Ron Paul's been wanting to do. God bless him. Dr. Paul's been wanting to do this for 26 years.
Correct. And here's the problem that I have with this, Congressman Grayson. This is what I wanted to get your thoughts on. And bear with me here because I've got a little bit to say about this, and then I want to get your thoughts. With regards to the Fed's claim and to their general counsel's claim, Mr. Alvarez, with all due respect to them, and the fact that they claim to have all of the gold in the United States that they claim to possess, that can be very deceptive. Meaning, as the Gold Antitrust Action Committee, or GATA, has put forth, the Federal Reserve, they believe, has been involved in surreptitiously suppressing the price of gold in order to create an artificially strong dollar policy. Now, if that is the case, the Fed may have lent out the gold in conjunction with bullion banks like J.P. Morgan Chase and sold that gold into the market, and there is a paper promise to return the gold, which is not at all feasible. So in reality, a tremendous amount of the United States gold could be gone. Now, Mr. Alvarez talks about his so-called independent audit firm confirming the gold is there. But many of us have no interest in the Fed's claims or their agents' claims. And as your friend and my friend, Harry Markopoulos, who broke open the Bernie Madoff Ponzi scheme, said in our interview, the Federal Reserve is the most corrupt and blind regulator that we have. And they need to be stripped of their power. They are beyond incompetent. They are to the point of total corruption. End quote. My question to you, Congressman Grayson, is how do we achieve an honest audit of the true amount of gold we still physically possess, not paper promises?
We're going to send in the auditors, and we're going to get answers. And I think in the process expose where the Federal Reserve has gone wrong, because the Federal Reserve fundamentally has gone wrong by not being answerable for 97 years, even on something as basic as, do you have the gold you claim to have? And that's why this has to end. As I said later on in the hearing, all sorts of things could be happening, and we wouldn't even know. I mean, for goodness sake, Bernanke admitted in a different hearing that he gave out $500 billion, that's $500 billion, to foreigners, and he doesn't even know who got the money. And everybody knows that since a year ago, when the Federal Reserve changed its lending policies, they haven't been doing it anonymously through the market. They've been picking favorites, playing favorites, and giving money, huge amounts of bailout money surreptitiously to Citibank and others, while the Main Street Savings and Loan, the Community Savings and Loan, go straight to hell. And this is why the banking institutions in this country are collapsing. because it's all being concentrated in the hands of a tiny number of people who've made mistake after mistake after mistake and never have to answer for it. In order to have capitalism, you need to have bankruptcy. And what happens is every time these banks lurch into yet another error, Uncle Fed comes along and bails them out.
Well, you mentioned the small institutions there, or the local banks or the regional banks, and quite correctly you mentioned that they are suffering because of this. And when you look at former Fed Chairman Alan Grayson, he really aided and abetted all of this overextended, reckless leveraging in these banking institutions. And the idea was that basically when things went wrong, that the taxpayers would bail them out systemically. But also, as you know, Congressman Grayson, it's the smaller banks that suffer. And I was just talking to one of the safest banks in the United States, and we were talking about their FDIC fees. Now, it just